Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing the Radeon RX580 8GB model in God of War Ragnarok. This one is the XFX GTS XXX version of the card. We are running it with the latest AMD drivers available to it, and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power-Up's GPU-Z. Again, it has 8GB of GDDR5 memory there, and it says 1.1 right there because there's nothing 3D on screen. If there is, it goes up to 3.0. Over on the left, I'm pairing it with a Ryzen 5 3600X CPU and 16GB of RAM. Let's get into it, shall we? And here we have it. Let's go over the settings first. I am playing at 1080p resolution right now using TAA native, which is the least intensive method of AA, and the low settings preset because, well, it's an RX580, you know? And also, low settings don't really look all that bad in this game. They actually look really good. So let's continue there. And here we have it, guys. 1080p native resolution, low settings, seems to be playable, and very playable, actually, on the RX580 8GB model. This is great to see. I always love to go back to this GPU and be amazed at its age and how well it performs recent titles. Well, sometimes. Wukong was kind of an exception, and other UE5 titles as well, but these PS4/5 titles, you know, they usually look very good and run pretty well, even on something that's almost 8 years old like the RX580 8GB model, guys. Look at this, hitting 60 frames per second here in the river, looking great as well. Like if I stop right here so YouTube compression doesn't kill the image quality completely, you can see there is quite a lot of detail even on low settings, right? I mean, maybe over here is a little bit better for you to see that because we got better textures here. But yeah, for low settings, this looks absolutely great in my opinion. I wish we could see like a very low settings preset actually, because low settings in my opinion are supposed to look low settings, you know? They're supposed to look bad and perform very well, and although these perform very well, of course, they don't look bad at all. So there is still a little bit of headroom there to lower down the settings in my opinion and make the game look worse to run on stuff like 4GB GPUs, which are struggling a little bit. Actually, they don't even allow you to launch the game on a 4GB card, which is extremely ridiculously stupid in my opinion, and the developers should definitely change that. But there's a mod in Nexus Mods that allows you to launch the game on a 4GB card. I don't think we went there. Interesting. We're going to explore a little bit in this video, my friends. Something that I haven't seen yet. Also, sorry about the screen tearing. This doesn't seem to support the... Wait, there are enemies here. Interesting. Variable refresh rate, okay, VRR, or FreeSync in this particular capture card. Now over here fighting these guys, I am feeling a bit of a slowdown sometimes, as you can see, like it drops down into the 30s sometimes. Not a bad experience still, kind of expected, I guess, with a little bit more effects on screen, you know. The 580 struggles a little bit more then, dropping down into the lower 30s. Yeah, fighting is always a little bit more intensive than just boating around, as I say, over in this area. Although this area is pretty damn intensive, you know? For example, the first few hours of the game, or first 2 hours actually of the game, you will be in that forest area with a lot of snow and stuff like that, and that's way less intensive than these areas around here. Look at that, 38 there. Okay, it's not bad, but it's not a great experience. But it's definitely playable, and if you want a stable experience, you could go ahead and... Wait, what is this? And play it with like a 30 FPS lock, and then it will feel stable, you know? And you're not going to feel any drops because it doesn't drop from 30. Anyway, let's move on, guys, and I'm going to try some frame generation. Okay, this is FSR 3.1 frame generation, so it works very well. And it actually saved the GTX 1660 Ti when I tested that, because that was also having some VRAM related issues. You can see the allocation there on the on-screen display is at 6.2 or 6.3 gigabytes, and the NVIDIA GPUs usually use a little bit less VRAM than the AMD counterparts, but still, the 1660 Ti was definitely swapping some things into the RAM, and that was making things not as smooth as they should have been. Although enabling frame gen, which usually uses a little bit more VRAM, fixes the GTX 1660 Ti's performance, which is absolutely insane. I've never seen it happen, aside from like Microsoft Flight Simulator. When enabling frame gen, it actually removes all of the stuttering issues. It's pretty good. So here, I was actually expecting a bit higher performance with the RX580, guys. It is in the 60s. We were previously in like, what, the 50s around here, 70s now, but it's not really doubling our FPS, unfortunately. However, the input lag is not bad, going up to the 80 FPS mark sometimes. Yeah, I thought it was going to be a little bit worse when I saw like 60 and 70 FPS here in terms of input lag, but no, you can have that 60 plus FPS experience apparently with input lag that's acceptable for an RX580, and you could also go into like the AMD drivers, enable input lag 2.0, or actually let me check that. Oh yes, Radeon anti-lag, that's it. I'm gonna enable that actually to make the experience a little bit better, hopefully, or not, because it wrecked our frame time. What the hell? Okay, so don't do that. Much better without the anti-lag enabled. That's so weird though. I really thought this was going to be better with anti-lag, because a lot of people tell me actually, oh, you should enable anti-lag so the input lag is a little bit better. But well, with the 580 at least, which is an older GPU once again, as well as running outdated drivers as well. Well, yeah, it's not a good idea to enable that, okay? Just to get used to the input lag here. Maybe play with a controller, because you're less prone to noticing input lag with that. I am honestly impressed here by the little amount of input lag that we get with 60 and 70 frames per second. I thought it was going to be horrible. Turns out it isn't. For an RX580, okay? Now, I'm gonna disable FSR FG, and I'm gonna enable FSR 3.1 on quality. Here we go. This is rendering at 720p resolution and upscaling to 1080p. Still on the low settings. Again, I really think you shouldn't really go over low settings with an RX580, and isn't this very similar to what we saw at native resolution, actually? Yeah, this is pretty weird. Like, if I stand right here, we're getting 48 FPS, and if I disable FSR 3.1 and enable TAA native, we're getting 42 FPS. So we gain 6 frames per second by rendering the game at 720p resolution. Is that worth it? I mean, it might make a little bit of a difference when you're fighting and stuff, and the FPS are dropping into the lower 30s. Here with quality FSR 3.1, it would drop into the higher 30s instead. So it's a bit more stable for sure, and you can hit those 60 FPS a little bit more often. But it's not that great. Like, I was expecting a bigger jump in FPS by using upscaling than 6 frames per second. Anyway, yeah, this is not really going to change your experience here, guys, unfortunately. Water becomes a lot more shimmery here with FSR 3.1 on quality. It's the same thing for DLSS, actually, on the NVIDIA RTX GPUs. The water is always super shimmery with upscaling. I don't really like that too much, but it is what it is. It's only the water that looks a little bit meh. Everything else looks pretty good here with FSR 3.1. I can see a little bit of pixelation around the characters there while moving the camera around like this, but it is not bad. Like, FSR 3.1 is a good improvement, definitely an awesome improvement over FSR 3.0 and FSR 2 as well. I really like to see it implemented in games, but usually some developers just choose to implement the other older FSR versions, even though FSR 3.1 has been out for a couple of months, or like 3 months actually. Why not implement FSR 3.1? The modders can do it in like 1 day. Why can't developers do that? It's kind of ridiculous to me, and I would love to see FSR 3.1 in more games. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead, open this thing, getting 51 FPS, 38, 1% lows. Again, it drops into the high 30s instead of the low 30s around this area, for example. That's alright. It's Again, not amazing. It's not 60 plus FPS. I would really like to have seen 60 plus, because sometimes FSR 3.1 on quality will deliver a lot more FPS, but in this game it doesn't seem to be the case, at least with an old GPU like the 580. And now frame generation on top of quality FSR 3.1, this starts looking a little bit too pixelated, but I'm using a very big monitor here, so that's probably why it looks so pixelated to me at the moment. On a 1080p native monitor, like 24 inches, it would likely look pretty good, okay? Even with FSR 3.1 and frame generation on top. So that's not bad. Oh boy, okay. Where? I already killed all of them? Wait, there are actual people here. That's weird. I didn't notice that before. Okay. Interesting. Anyway, going up to 90s, 100s in less intensive scenarios, going down into the 60s here. You can definitely notice the difference in input lag, by the way, with 100 FPS compared to 60, but it's still playable once again, and I guess you won't really drop into the 50s now with FSR quality plus frame generation. So if you really want that 60 plus 100% of the time with a 580, it's going to be possible with these settings. Also, since the VRAM isn't maxed out, you could increase like texture quality to medium. High is a bit too much for 8GB cards, by the way, but medium will work fine, and you can improve the texture quality without a hit to FPS as well. So that's probably the perfect settings for the RX580. Low settings with medium textures, FSR FG, and native TAA as well. I think I would pick those settings for myself to play this game with. If the input lag becomes a little bit unbearable in like boss fights, you know, when you need a little bit faster reactions, just disable it and use native FPS with like 30 to 40 frames per second. At least it will feel instant, turning the camera around and stuff like that and attacking the bosses. So yeah, in the end, it can definitely be very enjoyable with the RX 588 GB GPU. It's just great to see. It's a breath of fresh air compared to other titles that we've been seeing in 2024 and 2023 as well. So yeah, thanks very much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed. If you want to buy the game, feel free to do so. I'm not sure if it's a good idea if it costs the same as the GPU, you know. But hey, the 580 can still provide a very, very decent experience. Catch you in the next one. Love you all. Bye-bye.